Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Amy Coney Barrett Day, yes. Day number one of the ram through. The court is not political, according to Mike Lee, with kind of the lie of the day. That the court isn't a political body, which is just completely ridiculous. The last 30, 40 years, all we've heard out of conservatives is that they're activist judges, while they've been ramming the court full of activists, real, true activist judges. The one way you can tell when something's going on, when the Republicans are pointing their finger at it. When they're saying there are activist court judges on the court, you can tell that's what they want. And it was an interesting day one, I'll be honest. I watched maybe half of it. That's about all I could stomach of the grandstanding. And really, the first 15 minutes is all you needed because you got what the Democrats came to talk about. Understand, in my view, there's no way to stop this nomination. There's no way to stop Amy Coney Barrett from being on the court. We are going to get a religious zealot on the court. It's going to happen. And we'll see where that takes us as a country. We've been in bizarre moments before. We've lived through it. We will fight through this as well. So don't go taking to the bridge. Don't be going, oh, I can't take it, I'm leaving. No, stay, stand, fight. That's what we do in this country. That's what patriots do. They fight for their country. But here's the thing. The Democrats came with a very simple message. They talked about the decisions that were yet to come, and it focused mostly on the ACA and Roe versus Wade. And understand, Donald Trump has said, numerous times that there's no way he's going to appoint somebody who isn't going to destroy both of those. And this is one of those things where Trump supporters are absolutely, positively, without question, correct. When Donald Trump says he's going to do something, you should believe him because he's going to. And in this frame, I'm right there. He's going to. There's no way that she didn't give him her assurance that both of those were going to go by the wayside. There's just no way in my view. My problem is outside of the what's front and center with Roe, outside of the political part of that, I'm thinking about all of the other stuff, the attacks on consumers' rights, the attacks on workers' rights, the attacks on voting rights, the attacks on women's rights, civil rights. You can go down the list. Basically, the attack of the 20th century, undoing everything, every bit of progress that came after World War II. This is where they want to go back to. And I thought the Democrats should have spent more time talking about those as well, because a lot of people are like, well, I don't really care about the ACA. I don't get my health care through that. That's just those people. And there are a lot of people who go, abortion's not my issue. Don't really care. Not a big deal. I think they need to focus a little bit of the other stuff as well. Look, the end of the ACA and the end of Roe are huge changes. Massive changes to our system and immediate. But so are the other things that are going to slowly walk by us. And the one thing that Trump has done masterfully is they have packed the courts with anti-worker, anti-women, you name it kind of judges that are moving us toward that position to end the 20th century. And if the highest court in the land is out there doing it, so much better for them. Now, the Republican argument was, how many people remember Clayton Williams? Anybody remember him? Oil and gas tycoon? He ran for governor and lost to Ann Richards back, forever ago. And I loved Ann Richards. She was fantastic. But in that race, he basically said if rape was inevitable, relax and enjoy it. And that's kind of what the Republicans are saying. We're going to do this to you no matter what. There's nothing you can do to stop us. So just relax and enjoy it. And, to be honest, if I'm one of the Democrats, I don't even play the game. I don't even show up. I make them go through the process of pushing through her appointment without any minority view. And now they will do it. Trust me. Mitch McConnell is not going to let this seat go unfilled under any circumstances. There could be a nuclear blast tomorrow, and Mitch McConnell would be dragging people. In fact, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, said he'd put on a hazmat suit and crawl through the fiery pits of hell if he had to. I'm not sure about the fiery pits of hell part, but he would put on the suit and he would crawl to cast his vote for her. And I think that speaks volumes about where the Republicans are. I think they know they're going to lose the Senate, and this is their last hope to control the next 2 years. Because, I understand. I believe Democrats got 2 years to get things done. 2022, again, as every midterm is, will be a bloodbath, and the pendulum will swing back. The question is, how far do we push it back towards where things used to be, towards normalcy? How far back do we get it? Now, what you also heard from the Republicans outside of, just you're going to get it anyway. You might as well enjoy it. Is this idea that there's this war on religion. And there really kind of is almost like a holy war going on in our country, where we're now justifying someone who clearly is on the extreme side of mainstream religion. Some of her views outside of the mainstream. A lot of people like me question whether that should be on the court. Someone who has the extreme view of their faith. I have a problem with that. Does it mean she's going to not be on the court? Does it mean she's not going to be qualified to do the job? No, but I think you do have to bring that out. I think you do have to bring that some who practice that extreme viewpoint have beliefs, have an ideology outside of the mainstream, and I think that has to be considered. Now, Republicans are doing their foolhardy best to make sure that we don't talk about that. That any talk of her beliefs is a war on faith, and I'm not going to do that. Now, the question then becomes, let's say Joe Biden decides I'm going to put a Muslim on the court. Do you think Ben Sasse and the rest of the Republican Party, do you think Tom Cotton and the rest of the Republican Party and Langford and the rest of them, do you think they would be asking about religion questions? Do you think they'd be okay with a religious test? Do you think? It's just one of those moments. Now, like I said, I only watched about half of it. I will watch some of it tomorrow because she may actually answer some questions, and it'll be interesting to see how she evades the questions with whatever answers that are prepared for her. I don't expect any real answers. I expect a lot of what John Roberts said. Oh, I believe in decided law. I'm going to call balls and strikes. I'm expecting a lot of that stuff because she has to say it. She's not going to come out and say, no, screw you guys. We won. Yeah. She's not going to break out the pom-poms and the short skirt and jump up and down in your chairs. Rose gone, Rose gone. She's not going to do that. She's not going to, say all you people with pre-existing conditions. She's not going to flip you off. That's not going to happen. She's going to do it in a much nicer way and say, no. We have to follow what I believe the Constitution to be and the original intent that my mentor, Antonin Scalia, drilled into me. That only white men over 21 can vote and women folk like me can't vote and can't own property and head of household voting and, oh boy. Yeah. So going to be an interesting week, and we're going to talk about that here today on the program. Also, a big rally today. Donald Trump back on the campaign trail in Orlando. They're at the international airport there in Orlando, where evidently he is now cured, completely cured. In fact, he's immune, he says, immune to everything. He said, I feel so powerful, or I feel so powerful. He said he could walk into the audience. He'd walk in there. He said he'd kiss the audience, everyone in the audience. He's going to kiss a big, big kiss. He'd kiss guys. He'd kiss the beautiful women. He'd kiss everybody. Just give you a big, fat kiss, he says. And I'm going, isn't that kind of what got you into trouble before? Isn't that, the like the 4 gazillion allegations of you actually doing what you said on those Access Hollywood tapes and just going up and grabbing her by the you know what? Isn't that kind of what got you into this mess? Which is kind of ironic because every day I hear people talk about Joe Biden sniffing the woman's hair, and I'm going, yeah, that's kind of weird. But he didn't go up and grab her by the you know what and then brag about it. Just a whole nother weird kind of moment. But the other thing that came out of the rally in Orlando that I thought very interesting, and it tells you how bloated Trump's ego really is. He basically told Puerto Rico that they've got to vote for him. I guess the paper towels. I guess it was the paper towels that they should be grateful for. He said, I'm not going to say the best, but I'm just about the best thing that ever happened to Puerto Rico. You better vote for me, Puerto Rico. Only problem. Oh, God. It's one of those moments where you go, is it possible this doofus is actually the president of the United States? Because I did ask one of my children who haven't taken the full high school civics yet, if Puerto Rico can vote for president. And they got it right. They said, no, Puerto Rico is not a state. They don't get a say in the presidential race. Who would think of something that stupid? Oh, our president? Yeah. Evidently, our president thinks that Puerto Rico can vote for him. Yeah. Let that sink in. The guy who's running the country doesn't even know who can vote for him. And I say, Don, pack up your box of Bounty and float your way over to Puerto Rico. Hand out as many paper towels as you want between now. In fact, pitch them like you did. Work on that toss. Spend the rest of the campaign there in Puerto Rico tossing out paper towels. What an absolute complete moron. But hey, look, it could be, honestly, and I got to step back and go, it could be the roid rage, could be the drugs that he's on, could be any of that stuff. And thank goodness he's on it because he's cured. In fact, as he said, he's now immune, feels better than he has in 20 years. Steroids will do that to you. And I say, good. I'm glad he's healthy. In fact, as he said, better than he's been in 20 years. So we can then focus on real issues like how bad he screwed the taxpayers in the last 3.5 years. How bad he has, basically strong-armed people into patronizing his businesses and putting money in his pocket. We should be talking about that. We should be talking about how it's possible that the bus driver, that the truck driver, that the guy swinging the hammer, that the person who hands the little bag out the window at the fast food joint pays more a year in federal taxes than a guy who claims to be a billionaire. Maybe we should be talking about that. Just kind of throwing it out there. Now, as you saw from the New York Times, they did an analysis of his tax returns, and they have, lo and behold, shown more than 200 companies or special interest groups or foreign governments that have somehow been able to funnel the Trump organization a ton of money, millions and millions of dollars. They claim that 60 patrons, who, like I said, lobbyists, foreign governments, they spent around $12 million on properties associated with the Trump organization. Now you go, oh, it's only $12 million. Well, when you're $421 million in debt, just kind of throwing this out here as an aside, maybe you need every penny you get. Now, the report goes on to say that there were almost 250 business executives, club members, lobbyists, Trump property employees, and current administration as sources that they spoke to that have pointed out, how these companies are and how these special interests are being funneled in that direction. And this is exactly what we were talking about in 2015 and 2016. The fact that he did not divest would make a conflict of interest to where if he is soliciting, and let's say he's not, for the benefit of the doubt, let's say, now I don't believe it, but let's just say, he had absolutely nothing to do with it. Let's say that Kush and the Ding Dong kids They had nothing to do with funneling these people to lining their pocket with money. Let's just say that they didn't want them to buy their crappy books and make donations to different things that they had their greedy paws in. Let's just say that, just for the sake of things. The mere fact that he's still attached to the business opens it up to these questions. And why would you do that if you're not running the operation? Why would you want to have that cloud hanging over you? And the truth is, he sees it as a money-making venture, as the reports from the beginning were, that he never wanted to win, never thought he was going to win, probably didn't think we were as stupid as we were in some places to actually vote for him. And he's like, hey, I can now cash in. Because after all, I am $421 million in debt. So when I throw this out to people, because I had this back and forth today with someone who I said, you do realize that, this is going on. And the answer is, I don't believe it. I go, but, according to the Times, the New York Times, the liberal New York Times. I'm going, no, the tax returns, the tax experts they've got. And if you read through the article, they're fairly, they break it down for you piece by piece. You could, if you really wanted to, you could figure this out. And the reality is they don't want to figure it out. There's this cult of personality, this image of Trump being the fighter of every man, this idea that he's one of us, that he understands the struggles of average everyday workers. And you go, I'm not quite sure where that's coming from, but it's based nowhere in reality. And this is one of those moments where I'm hoping this election that we come back to some kind of collective sanity, that once he loses, and I'm hoping that he loses, and I'm hoping everyone is registering to vote and has a plan to vote, whether it's by mail and putting it in the box yourself. And be careful, better be a verified box, because some Trumpkins are making up boxes. Plan to vote, execute the vote, and then stay engaged to push through. We got a lot of cleaning up to do. Quick break, right back.
American, then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1899. That was the day union miners in Mount Olive, Illinois, began commemorating Miners' Day. Every year, thousands came into town for a parade, music, and speeches. Mount Olive was the site of the only union-owned cemetery in the United States, established by UMWA Local 728 in the aftermath of the Verdun Massacre. A year before to the day, striking miners had been killed in a shootout with company goons attempting to herd scabs into the mines in Verdun, Illinois. But, as Mother Jones biographer Elliot Gorn notes, the train never unloaded its cargo, and the company was forced to settle. The Union hoped to erect a gravesite monument commemorating those miners who had been killed at Verdun, but they were refused by those who considered the fallen miners to be murderers and not martyrs. That's when the United Mine Workers established the Union Miners Cemetery, and on this day, 10,000 turned out for the Union's memorial ceremony. The United Mine Workers unveiled a monument dedicated to the fallen Verdun miners E.W. Smith, Joe Gitterly, Ernest Kramer, and E.F. Long. The day was filled with parades, music, laying of wreaths, and speeches. Haymarket widow and radical activist Lucy Parsons was among the speakers. In his book, Death and Dying in the Working Class, Michael Rossnow notes that her presence drew a direct connection between the fallen miners and the Haymarket martyrs, cut down while advancing the cause of labor. Thousands traveled to Mount Olive every year for celebrations, including Eugene V. Debs, miners leader John Mitchell, and Mother Jones. In 1923, Mother Jones asked to be buried with her boys, noting they are responsible for Illinois being the best organized labor state in America. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, a fun day. Fun day was had by all in the Senate. Mike Lee showed up. Not sure if he's contagious. Not sure if, maybe he'll be a super spreader. Maybe maybe everything around Amy Coney Barrett is about spreading the virus. As someone sent me, and I told him you got to get me a T-shirt. As where RBG was notorious RBG, it is contagious ACB. So if I get that shirt, I'm still waiting for it. But anyway, here to share some thoughts on the day's events of, like I said, I only got through maybe half of it. I've asked Stephanie Wiley to come talk with us. She's a senior policy analyst for legal progress there at the Center for American Progress. Stephanie, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I got to tell you, let's start right from the beginning. This was just political theater to me, and I wasted about half of the day watching it. I'm frustrated by the whole endeavor, and I guess that's where I'm at. I think that's where a lot of Americans are at this moment.
I would agree with that. I watched the majority of the hearing today, and what I saw is that it's basically what I expected, that Republicans are determined to push through Barrett's nomination, no matter who it hurts, and they even vowed that they'd appoint her before this hearing began. I will say that Democrats were rightly focused on what the stakes are in this nomination by highlighting the stories and the real people who will be hurt if Barrett is confirmed, and those are the people who will lose health care if the Affordable Care Act, which is being heard 1 week after the election, is overturned, and these people also be hurt by the loss of protections for their pre-existing conditions. And COVID will be one of those pre-existing conditions.
Right. I watched Cory Booker give what I thought was a really good bit of speech there, and my mind couldn't help but go to the place where, Cory, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. All these people are gonna have these pre-existing conditions, are gonna have all these health problems. All this bad stuff is gonna happen. But sadly, these are the wrong people to talk to, because they clearly don't care, because they clearly don't, and I hate being this hyperbolic, they clearly don't have a plan on how to deal with healthcare. They are the you're on your own society, and I think the sooner we as the voting populace wake up to that reality, the better.
I agree with you there. It doesn't seem like they definitely don't have a plan for anything, and it doesn't seem like they're focused on what's happening right now. If the ACA is overturned, more than 20 million Americans will lose coverage. More than 135 million people with disabilities and chronic health conditions, and that includes more than 7 million COVID-19 survivors, will lose protections for those pre-existing conditions. But for the American people, I still say, contact your senators. There's still things that can be done even now. Contact your senators. Tell them this is not what they should be focusing on right now. The Senate should be focused on COVID and COVID relief measures.
Absolutely. They should be doing a whole bunch of other things. But here's the thing, and this is what's frustrating to me. I still have liberal friends who, no, we should be doing this, and we should be fighting here, and we should be doing this. I'm going, at this point, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, there's no stopping this unless a couple of Republicans step forward and say this is wrong. There's nothing the Democrats can do. There's no amount of finger waving, chest thumping, door slamming, fist pounding. There's nothing they can do to stop this proceedings.
I will say this is outside the pale what's happening right now. It should not be happening. We've never had a Supreme Court nominee confirmed this close to an election. I will say, though, that don't give up. Keep fighting. We don't know what can happen. There's still time, and there could be something that can happen in these intervening days. I'll also add on that obviously Republicans are still not taking this seriously. I think you mentioned Mike Lee, who is, COVID positive, and actually took his mask off to speak today. And then the White House Chief of Staff refused to speak to reporters if he couldn't take his mask off. So Republicans aren't taking this seriously, but there's still time for something to be done and for this to be stopped. And so, again, I just urge people to contact their senators and tell them what they need to be focused on. Yeah,
especially if your senators are Republicans. Because ultimately the Democrats, I don't see many Democrats voting for her. It'll be interesting to see if that does happen. But I see this being a party line vote. And this is one of those moments, as you've said, this never before have we been this close to election. Just 4 years ago, you had the Republicans saying, no, we cannot possibly do anything with Merrick Garland because the people should decide. And now in a much, in an extraordinarily hypocritical fashion, which is common for them, this is the stunt they pull.
Absolutely. This is a blatant political party grab. You know, Trump and Republicans have politicized the judiciary for years now, and this is just another facet of that. We're seeing them trying to overturn the ACA, which they could not get overturned in Congress, so they're now trying to use judicial activism to get it overturned. And Trump has already said that he expects the Supreme Court to have to decide the election and wants someone on the Supreme Court for that reason. So I absolutely agree with you that this is a partisan power grab. And I also agree with you that I see this going down party lines. You know, today's hearing, what we heard was a lot of Republicans focused on non-existent attacks on Barrett's faith, while Democrats were rightly focused on what's actually happening here, and also on Barrett's record and what she'll do if she's appointed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of this, you know, I'm in this weird world because I sadly I see us in the middle, this being the middle of almost like a holy war in this country, because I do view Miss Barrett as something of a religious extremist, something of. I'm not calling her a terrorist. I see her as someone who has extreme faith, and I don't know that we've had this on the court, you know, in the past. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because, like I said, I don't see a way to stop her. But I also say, you know, since the Republicans are doing this, this opens up many opportunities to open up other ways of dealing with the court issue. And I'm all in favor of putting additional justices on the court to even the court out. I don't want the swing to be one way or the other. I want the court to be even. I want them to be a fair arbiter of the law and not an ideological court like we're going to most certainly have with a 6-3 conservative court.
I'll agree with you that a 6-3 conservative court can definitely, you know, that will definitely change the jurisprudence we have now and can lead to some bad things. On the topic of what role Barrett's faith plays, I'll also say that I think Democrats are rightly focused on the issues here. You know, we can look at Barrett's record and see what she's done, and that's the important part here. We see that she's made some bad decisions on healthcare, on reproductive rights, on civil rights, on consumer rights. And we know what she'll do once she's on the court because she's already shown us her votes on these decisions. As far as expanding the court or anything like that, I think that's rightly left to see after what happens here. I will say that CAP does support term limits for Supreme Court justices, but again, I'll have to agree with the tactics Democrats are taking in focusing on the issues in Barrett's record here and what's going to happen to people's health care during a pandemic if Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court. Yeah,
I think you do. The only thing the Democrats have is to point out how bad she's going to be on the court with a much more, and I shouldn't even say conservative, because I should argue more corporate move, because this Supreme Court, the current Supreme Court, overwhelmingly sides with the Chamber of Commerce whenever they're in front of it. Something like 70% of the time when the Chamber of Commerce is involved in a case, they swing that direction. And Amy Coney Barrett is actually worse than that. Whenever the Chamber of Commerce is involved in a case in front of her, it's like 76% of the time. So for me, the end of, you know, what little consumer rights we have, what little worker rights we have, and then you can get into the social stuff of same-sex marriage and an abortion and all of that other stuff. But for me, this is going to affect everyone, and I don't know that we've really had a moment to digest how much change quite possibly could come out of this one justice sitting on the court.
I absolutely agree with you, and I actually have an op-ed in Fortune coming out tomorrow on how this, you know, if she is confirmed to the court, what a 6-3 court, what that looks like for corporations and what stakeholder-minded corporations should be doing. And yeah, the Chamber of Commerce and other businesses have had a very successful time at the Supreme Court. They're, I think, one of the top 16 filers at the court right now. They've responded to the friendly nature of the court, and we'd only see that increase under Barrett. You know, she has made some bad decisions on whether people can recover funds whether the FTC can recover funds, and other bad decisions on racial justice, rights for workers, and segregation. So this will affect a lot of things, just as you said, and of course I always bring it back to the healthcare. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We see Republicans who have been diagnosed positive, like Mike Lee, not wearing a mask today, or Lindsey Graham, who has recently refused to take a COVID-19 test and not wearing their mask today. So it would affect us for a generation if Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And the other part of this is, look, and I think the Democrats hit on this in the parts that I saw pretty well. The fact that Donald Trump has come out and said unequivocally that he will not appoint someone, he will not nominate someone to sit on the court unless they are going to overturn Roe and unless they're going to dump the dreaded Obamacare. And I'm waiting for how that is spun, because he has said that numerous times. And, I think we all know, where she is on the abortion issue. There's the stuff she forgot to put down on her form about the speeches she gave to anti-abortion groups. But that's all stuff we already know. The ACA part of it, I think, is really important for people to understand. And this is going to send healthcare, as you've said, into a tailspin in this country in the worst possible moment.
Absolutely. And I also agree with you exactly. Trump has promised to only name justices who would overturn Roe v. Wade. And reproductive freedom is one of the other important things at stake. And there are more than a dozen cases on sexual and reproductive rights that are one step away from the Supreme Court right now. So that's a definite threat that Barrett would pose on the court.
So let me ask you this, because and I want to go back to the faith thing for a minute, because the Republicans really wanted to make this the argument that she's being basically persecuted for her faith, and I say no, she's not being persecuted for her faith. It's what the rest of us are going to have to live with out of it. When John Roberts was on the court, he said he believed in decided law. He believed in stare decisis, was only going to call balls and strikes. And yet we've had a number of cases come out of that that were basically created new law out of whole cloth, that I don't know what strike zone he was calling, but it wasn't the one of decided law. I look at someone like her. Am I going to hear she's only going to call balls and strikes and she believes in decided law? Are we going to hear that same kind of rhetoric while knowing that's not even remotely close to the truth?
Well, I think the thing is that during the hearing today, Republicans stated numerously about attacks on Barrett's faith, and these just haven't happened. There haven't been any attacks on her faith. The Democratic candidate for president is Catholic. The Democratic Speaker of the House is Catholic. Let's see, 5 of the 8 current Supreme Court justices are Catholic, and government officials across the country are Catholic. There's no bias here against her faith. What I'm seeing happening is that these false claims of any bias against Barrett's faith are being used as subterfuge to insulate Barrett from questions about her record on cases affecting, as we discussed, reproductive rights and health care and LGBTQ people. And that's what we cannot allow to happen, because people's rights are at stake here. Yeah. And I think that's the most relevant thing, is her record.
We all want to believe that the court is blind. I mean, Lady Liberty with the blindfold holding the scale. What do they call her? The one with the scales and the blindfold. Does she have a name?
Oh goodness. It's Justice in there?
Yeah, Lady Justice, whatever.
Justice?
She's blindfolded because she's not supposed to. The
Right.
idea is that, her own interpretations, her own belief structure, her own ideology isn't supposed to weigh into it. It's supposed to be all about the law. And we all want to believe that the Supreme Court can be that. But yet in this hyper-polarized world, do we ever get back to a place where the judges, and I forget who it was today who said that, there was a time in the past that, we would get, I think it was Ben Sass, we would get 80, 90 votes for a Supreme Court justice. Do you ever see us getting back to that moment?
That's an interesting question. I will say that having comments, like the kinds of comments and attacks that judges and justices get from President Trump, with him stating that he has his judges, or there are Obama judges, And, he has attacked judges who haven't decided cases with him. I think that is a huge problem with the politicization of the court that we see. And I believe Justice Roberts eventually even had to speak out against these attacks and say, the court doesn't have political justices, and that they're, like you said, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind. I think what's important is to vote and hopefully get the country back to a place where we're not seeing this politicization of the Supreme Court. I'll also add, part and parcel of that politicization is this entire nomination and hearing and confirmation hearing that we're seeing today. This is a political power grab, and absolutely unheard of that you would even consider someone this close to an election when Republicans didn't even want to consider President Obama's nominee for the court nearly a year away, and now we're less than 30 days away, and we're looking at, and they're hoping to confirm a justice.
Not 30.
So,
what are we, 22 days?
Yeah, it's under 30. I think you're right. I think it's 22.
Yeah,
exactly.
22 days. I mean, and she will be seated on the court. They want to ram her through so fast that she will be there the day of Election Day, so that if there is a problem, she can cast that deciding vote. And then it has to throw into the question the legitimacy of the court. If this is the intended purpose of ramming her through, along with obviously doing away with Roe and the ACA.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. Over the years, like I said, Trump's attacks on the judiciary have thrown the legitimacy of the court into question, have raised issues about it. They definitely make people doubt the legitimacy of the court. And this is definitely the Trump plan. I mean, he's even said that that's why he wants her appointed, is in case the election comes before the Supreme Court. I will state, I think it was Senator Whitehouse who has stated that Barrett should recuse herself from those cases. I don't believe she's gotten a response to that, but this is definitely the reason she's being pushed through for the ACA and for the election.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the next couple of days play out. Stephanie, I appreciate the time and your thoughts. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Yes, you as well. Thank you.
Terrific stuff. Good stuff. Stephanie Wiley, Senior Policy Analyst there at Legal Progress. You can make sure you check out their work, AmericanProgress.org, the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. That was the day that the first Industrial Congress of the United States met in New York City. People interested in the problems facing working people, including long hours, low pay, and unsafe working conditions, gathered together. The labor movement was just beginning in this country. These were the years when the early trade unions were formed. Women played an important role in the early labor movement. Female textile mill workers in Lawrence, Massachusetts began to organize for the 10-hour day. In 1844, they established the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. Their goal was to improve working conditions in the mills. The Lowell Women's Group sent a representative to New York for the Labor Congress. Another important development of the fledgling labor movement was the establishment of labor presses. George Henry Evans, a labor newsman, also attended the Congress. He was the editor of a series of U.S. labor papers, starting with the Workman's Advocate in 1829. He had come to the United States from England, where he had been involved in the trade labor movement. He also attended the Labor Congress. The meeting recommended the formation of 3 organizations. First was an industrial brotherhood for workers, including farmers. The second was an industrial sisterhood for women workers. The third was a group for Friends of Labor. The Congress met again in New York in 1847, then again met in Chicago in 1850. These early efforts to establish larger labor groups did not gain much traction, but they began to lay the framework for workers to come together to discuss their challenges and imagine how they could work together to bring about change for better wages, shorter hours, and safer working conditions. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we heard today from our Republican friends how the Democrats are going to pack the courts. The Dems are going to get control, be afraid. They're going to pack the courts. Yet, I found it interesting that over the weekend, the Washington Monthly had an article on just that topic where they wrote Republicans in the Senate mounted historic blockade of President Obama's judicial nominees during the final 2 years of his second term. Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell has been laughing about it for years, considering it's hit his finest accomplishment. They say the results of the Republican strategy has been a historic packing of the courts by ultra-conservative activist judges. As of this writing, they say Trump and the Republican Senate have confirmed an astonishing 218 federal judges, mostly conservative white men, many of them deeply unqualified, far-right activists with little judicial experience. That's the Washington Monthly. And I would go, yeah, of course. And this is the icing on the very top with Miss Barrett. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the day's events and really what, not just the Supreme Court, but our entire court system means for workers, for consumers, for women, for minorities, all down the road. I've asked our good friend, labor attorney Erwin Aronson, to come talk with us. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick. How you doing?
I'm good. I half a day of watching what was interesting banter back and forth in our Senate, but other than that, pretty good.
Got it. Well, I don't know if interesting is the word I would choose. Troubling is a different word, and it's the one that I'm focused on this evening because this entire process is deeply troubling in the context of our democracy. So I get it. I hear what you're saying.
But if you heard, Mike Lee, you heard, the court's not political. If you heard Ben Sass, the court's not political. If you go down the line, I can't even remember the guy's name, Kripo, saying, well, we're not doing anything bad here. It's happened before, trying to justify. It's like the guy at the airport playing the 3-card money game. They're going to show you one side of the card.
Look, if they didn't think it was bad, they would not have engaged in 180 degrees different in the final year of the Obama administration, when President Obama, who was elected to a 4-year term, at the end of the third year of his 4-year term, in the face of a vacancy on the Supreme Court, nominated an extraordinary jurist, Merrick Garland, and McConnell, with a great deal of pride, refused to have a hearing on that nomination, much less a Senate vote. And the reason that he did that was because he could. And somehow or another, inexplicably, what was something that was really terrible 3.5 years ago is now the natural recurrence today. And if we could understand that, we might understand a lot. It's probably a whole lot like the President of the United States and his wife voting absentee and by mail, and that's okay, but you or I voting by mail in Pennsylvania is somehow undermining the linchpin of our democratic system of government and riddled with fraud.
Yeah, it boggles the mind, doesn't it? But, the Republicans will tell you, Erwin, that it's completely different now. It's a whole different scenario because they control the Senate and the White House. They have the power. And if you listen to them, and they went through this quite painstakingly to say that it's always been done this way, except for that one time when the Republican president, Abe Lincoln, didn't do it. But it's always been this way, Erwin. It's always been this way.
Well, they sure have to do an awful lot of explaining for something that has always been this way. The practical reality is that it has never been this way. But the other practical reality is that, once again, this is all so very Trumpian. The Supreme Court is certainly the shiny object that gets all of our attention. But the vast majority of cases that make it to the Supreme Court of the United States are cases that are there within the court's discretion. we lawyers refer to this as an application for allowance of appeal. It is not an appeal as of right, except on those rare occasions where it's a dispute between two states. Most other cases that find their way to Supreme Court find their way to Supreme Court because three members of the court decide that they'd like to hear the case upon a petition. And that's a piece of the internal operating rules of the court. So the suggestion that the court is not political is absurd. It's absurd at every possible level. First of all, in order for someone to be nominated to a federal lifetime judicial appointment, inevitably that person, he or she, must have a political sponsor. Typically, it is a member of the Congress or a member of the U.S. Senate. Sometimes it is someone else who is well connected, and certainly in the Trump administration, where this has been converted from a periodic practice as part of the overall operation of government to the Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump confirmation factory. We have seen this change, but these people are all political. Remember, I ran for a judgeship once in Pennsylvania, and a state court judgeship. At least in this state, we have the honesty and integrity to recognize these are political, and that's why people run for them. This whole judicial process at the federal level with lifetime appointments is highly politicized and highly political, and people don't get far along in that process whatsoever without being very much politically connected. And political connection in other administrations has typically meant a particular approach one way or another in terms of public policy and in terms of legal philosophy and in terms of judicial temperament. But in this administration, like everything else, it's for sale. And the real piece of information, once we get past this shiny object that is the Supreme Court on which everybody is focused, are the 213 federal district court judges and federal circuit court judges that have been appointed for life. The vast majority of them are not merely white men, as you described in the intro, but are very young, typically in their 40s. And that means that somebody will be appointed in their 40s, confirmed by the McConnell confirmation factory, and serve on the bench for another generation, a service that will stand to be a repudiation of workers' rights for another generation or two. That is scary and that is shocking. And unlike the Supreme Court, where appeals are taken only on discretion, the U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeal are mandatory appeals. The U.S. District Courts are mandatory trial courts, original jurisdiction. And that is where working people's rights get carved up. That is where women's rights get carved up. That is where threshold decisions on civil rights get carved up. That is where threshold decisions on access to safety at the workplace get ribboned. That is where voting rights get carved up. Just this past weekend, on Friday night, late into Friday night, early Saturday morning, we got a decision from a U.S. District Court judge in Pittsburgh regarding voting rights and the Donald Trump campaign effort to basically subvert in its entirety Pennsylvania's mail ballot system. And that came from a federal court because the Trump campaign went forum shopping and shopped for a federal judge in the Pittsburgh area to repudiate Pennsylvania state law. And there, shockingly, and in the rarest of rare moves, a 40-something-year-old Trump-appointed federal judge said that the Trump campaign had engaged in such conjecture and such hyperbole with no evidence whatsoever that even he rejected their demand to undo Pennsylvania law and to supplement his judgment for that of the judgment of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that had interpreted Pennsylvania law. So where the rubber meets the road is not so much in the Supreme Court of the United States, but in the inferior federal courts that are filled with lifetime appointees, and we haven't even begun to deal with others. There are federal magistrates that are also long-term appointees, 15-year terms, federal bankruptcy judges that are all but lifetime appointments, and all too frequently, particularly in economic times like this, our members, our working people in this state and in other states have to face those bankruptcy judges, and that is a control legacy of the Trump administration that will last at least through the end of my career and probably much longer.
Yeah. So how do you take that message and boil that down to where the average member, the average working person understands just how important those lower court seats actually are? Because we've talked to, a couple of groups, Why Courts Matter and a number of other groups who focus on this over the last couple of years. And they've been hammering these points. But again, we always focus on the president's race or the Supreme Court, the big stuff, without thinking about all the underlying stuff. How do you get that message out to people? Because, when I hear folks talk about the Supreme Court, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna get our way, whichever way that is." How do you filter that down?
Well, I think you filter it down by recognizing what really gets to be at stake in the federal district courts. Every federal minimum wage act case, the Fair Labor Standards Act in my world, minimum wage, maximum hour law, every child labor case at the federal level, every civil rights case having to do with whether or not police are acting within the four corners of the law or not, every case involving Social Security benefits and Social Security access, every case involving determination of how schools are going to be accessed by people, are all decided in these federal courts. They're real day-to-day human rights, people rights, worker rights. So when an employer is engaged in wage theft in violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, that's a case that goes to the federal courts. And the Trump people have populated those federal courts with folks who simply sign on to the Trump drivel and not to what the law says. Anytime somebody is in a fight over whether or not they're eligible for Social Security disability payments, it goes to an administrative law judge of the Social Security Administration. And they have been instructed to deny benefits. And that's real, and it's here, and it's now, and it's not a case that's going to take 10 years to wend its way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. It's a case that goes from beginning to end in the course of a few months, and people who have been injured to the point of not being able to pursue their careers any longer, people who suffer from disabilities that make it impossible for them to work at their chosen career, and who are eligible for Social Security disability benefits according to the law, are being denied by Trump-appointed judges every single day, and it's not something that rises to the shiny object status of whether or not Roe v. Wade is going to continue to live, or whether or not the Second Amendment says that everybody has a right to keep and bear arms. But it's real and it's meaningful. It has an impact on whether or not we get to pay the rent, whether we can make the car payment this month, whether or not the kids, when they finally are able to go back to school, are going to get new shoes. That's reality, and that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where courts really do indeed matter. We have a fight right now that started in a federal district court over whether or not the Affordable Care Act will be permitted to live or die. In the 1930s, we had a court system that determined the issue of whether or not the National Labor Relations Act, the law that allows people the right to organize and bargain collectively through a representative of their own choosing, that basic democracy, was going to be permitted to be constitutional. And initially, the court system said it was not. Ultimately, we worked through that. But all along the way, whether or not a decision of an arbitrator reinstating somebody to their job who was wrongfully discharged can be upheld is a decision that's made by a federal judge in a federal court not the Supreme Court of the United States and not in those very attractive cases, but in shoulder-to-the-wheel, pick-and-shovel lawyer work that people like me do every day. So it's real, it's here, and it has to do with whether or not our children are going to get access to a decent education in Carlisle as well as in Lower Merion, and in Lower Merion as well as in the Chamonix, and in the Chamonix as well as North Allegheny. That those basic pieces of equality. It has to do with judges who decide the quality of the air we breathe and the quality of the water that our kids get to drink. And if you think that's an issue, think that's not a significant issue for federal courts. Think again, because we know what happened to the water supply in Lansing, Michigan.
Right. No, there's a lot to this, and it's not going to go away anytime quick. So let me ask you the last question I've got, because I'm getting a lot of people saying, how do we stop this? How do we undo all of this damage? Is there a way to stop Barrett's confirmation? Is there a way to undo what Trump has already done?
Well, there's a big way to undo the magnitude and the depth of what Trump has already done by doing the one thing we can do, and it's already started, and that's to vote. And vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Can we stop the Barrett confirmation process? This has denigrated, indeed, into a process where if you got the votes, you vote them, and that seems to be what's happening in the McConnell-run Senate. But we need to be mindful of the fact that the courts have already been packed, and it may be that we need to elect a new president to, among other things, unpack the courts. And I know that the Biden campaign has been loath to answer the question about packing the courts, because it's a heads they win, tails you lose kind of game, whatever you answer. But the real question that people like you, journalists, and opinion makers need to be asking is, what can we do to unpack the courts? And we do that by voting in this election.
There you go.
And exercising your right under Pennsylvania law with a mail ballot, get it in and get it done, and let's change the course of history.
There you go. Erwin, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you. Good to be here. Take care.
Good stuff. Our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Bury me with my boys in Mount Olive, and let no traitor draw breath over my grave. Such was the last wish of labor leader Mother Jones. She wanted her final resting place to be alongside the coal miners who gave their lives in the struggle to bring fair wages and a safe working environment to Verdun, Illinois. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1898. Members of the newly formed United Mine Workers of America were out on strike against the Chicago Verdun Coal Company mine. They demanded the company pay the new mining wage scale of 40 cents per ton of coal mined. The company refused. Worried that management would try to sneak in replacement workers, the striking men patrolled the railroad tracks leading to the mine. Both black and white strikers joined the lookout parties. Just a little after noon on that fateful day, the men spotted a train coming toward them. It was loaded with strikebreakers, African-American workers recruited from Alabama. Looking to escape the oppression of the South, the black workers had not been told about the labor unrest in Verdun. Many refused to work for the company once they learned the truth. The train was also packed with armed guards hired by the company. Determined not to let the replacement workers through, armed strikers met the train at the depot. A gun battle ensued. 8 miners were killed, 4 armed guards also died. A month later, the union won its wage demands. 3 of the Union miners who lost their lives that day were laid to rest at the Mount Olive Union Miners Cemetery. It was these men who Mother Jones loved as her boys.
New dirt's falling on a new made coffin. New dirt's falling on a new made coffin. way over at Union.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Some people who get elected to Congress grow in office. Others just bloat. Michael McCall is a bloater. A self-absorbed right-wing trumpeter, this Texas lawmaker is about the richest guy in the U.S. House, wallowing in some $113 million in personal wealth. McCall made his money the old-fashioned way. He married it. With his wife's inherited fortune, Michael decided to become a congressman, winning a grotesquely gerrymandered GOP district in 2004. Even by the low standards of Congress, McCall has been unaccomplished, unless you count championing tax breaks, regulatory favors, and corporate subsidies that have bloated his family's net worth by 940% since he's been in office. He's mostly known in Congress for his love of luxury living and for billing an unseemly number of those luxuries to us taxpayers. But here's an even starker measure of his character, his water meter. The McCalls live in a sprawling $7 million mansion in the scenic but arid hills of West Austin, where water conservation is an essential community ethic, unless you're a narcissistic politico. While the average Austin home uses 70,000 gallons of city water a year, McCall glugs down 1.5 million gallons, even winning Water Hog of the Year in 2017. Rather than cutting back, he has simply directed the city to stop revealing his actual usage. This is Jim Hightower saying, but he could be coming down for a splash landing. The district's demographics are rapidly changing. 60,000 more Latinx residents since 2012, for example. And Mike Siegel, a young civil rights champion, has rallied a popular grassroots uprising to pull into a tie with McCall. For workaday folks long disdained by the aloof incumbent, the sweet scent of comeuppance is in the fall air.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we got to hear a touch of Ms. Barrett's opening statement. Just going to enforce the rule of law, not solve all the world's problems. Nice words. I got to tell you, I don't buy it. I do think that in order to get the nod, there had to be some major assurances. Because like we've been saying, Trump all along has said there's no way that he is not going to get his repeal of the ACA. That anyone that he puts on that court, they better damn well fall in line. So I don't see how she didn't give him that guarantee. But hey, who knows? Here to share some thoughts on today's, well, whatever you want to call that. And the good thing is this is going to go even quicker than I thought because Lindsey Graham is speeding up the process. I've asked Marge Baker to come talk with us. She's the Executive Vice President of People for the American Way. Marge, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I guess let's start with your thoughts of today's affair.
Well, it's pretty clear this is a sham hearing, right? I mean, exactly as you said as your lead-in, Trump's made it very clear what his litmus tests are for somebody to sit on the Supreme Court. It's overturning the ACA, it's the Affordable Care Act, it's overturning Roe v. Wade, and it's being on the court in time to help him to win the elections in the court. So it's clear what the agenda is. I thought the Democrats did a really good job today of talking about the stakes, in particular the threat to people's health care, if Barrett's confirmed. Republicans didn't have an answer for that. It was all smoke and mirrors, and it's very clear they're not taking this seriously. This is a sham process. They're ramming it through. They're going to do whatever they can to get her on the bench as soon as possible. And what we have is the people's voice. What we have is the ability of the people to make it clear to the Republican senators that they got to put their constituents over their party, and or suffer the consequences in November.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen anyway, and I think that's part of the reason why they're doing this is they believe they're going to. And I think it was Ted Cruz who said they're going to see a bloodbath of Watergate proportions. because there haven't been the courageous Republicans to stand up to this White House. They've been walking lockstep with this administration from the very beginning, and this is just another one of those moments. In 2016, they were very clear. We're going to let the people decide.
Yep.
And now they've done it about face, and with a little caveat of, well, and I guess this is where you got to give them credit for being honest. We have the power. We can do it. We're going to do it.
That's exactly right, and they're doing it in the face of real public opposition. I mean, all the polling that we've seen shows, people want to wait for the next president to appoint this nominee to the court. They are really concerned about losing their health care. Overwhelmingly, huge proportion of the American public are really concerned about losing health care. They're opposed to overturning Roe v. Wade. I mean, they don't think there's voter fraud going on. So they're just doing this against the absolute will of the American people, and they're going to find out they're doing it against the will of the folks in their state who are going to vote them out of office.
Well, that's the hope. But, as I've been saying, outside of Roe, outside of the ACA, which obviously get the headlines and are, above the fold on the front page, there's everything else.
That's right.
There's the attack on workers' rights. There's the attacks on women's rights. Go down the list. I mean,
absolutely.
It's the repeal.
Right.
It's the repeal, in my view, of the entire 20th century.
I think that's right, and it's also, I mean, what's really troubling is it's not just repealing protections that are there, but assuming you get a Biden administration, assuming you have a Democratic House and Senate, it's going to be a court that's going to work as hard as it can to invalidate progressive measures. So we're going to have to work really extra hard to make sure we're fashioning legislation in a way that even this court couldn't overturn.
Yeah, the dreaded. Everybody I talk to who claims to be on the Trump train, or they're the ones flying the giant flags out in front of their house. It's all about being anti-socialist. We need Amy Coney Barrett. And look, I give the right wing credit. They have done a masterful job of building an echo chamber that keeps everybody on the same page and keeps feeding them misinformation, so that they can say, well, I can't tell you how many union guys I've talked to who say, Trump's not going to destroy the unions, even though the Janus decision happened because of him. But none of the bad stuff's going to happen. This is just to make America again, whatever the hell that means.
No, I think people are really going to see the consequences. And the other thing that I see is there's a growing awareness, and maybe not as much as we'd like, but there's a growing awareness of the role that the courts play in people's lives, and understanding of how important they are, and understanding that you're not going to have workers' rights, you're not going to have women's rights, all the issues that we're talking about. You're just not going to be able to move it if you have courts there that are getting in the way. So, I think there's, it took the right 40 years to get here. There's the beginning of a movement on the left. Hopefully it won't take 40 years, but we got to keep fighting.
No, absolutely. But this is one of those things. And my last guest was just talking about the lower courts are where all this stuff, all the bad stuff, really happens. Mm-hmm. And while we're focused on the Supreme Court, we're getting killed in the lower courts because Trump has just packed them with some of the youngest, most unqualified ideologues you could possibly get.
That's exactly right. I mean, the Affordable Care Act case came up through the lower courts, and through Trump-appointed judges on the lower courts. And it's the stats that I like to the Supreme Court hears about 100 cases a year. The courts of appeals, the next courts down, hear about maybe 35,000 cases a year, and the next courts down, the district court cases, hear 350,000 cases a year. There's a whole lot of cases that the district courts hear, and they're packed with Trump judges, and they can have real serious harm.
Yeah, and for me, the coronation of Miss Barrett just will put all the pieces right into place for us to go back in time, and as I said, undo the 20th century. And as a labor guy, I look at a return to the Lochner era, which a lot of conservatives believe Lochner was not decided properly. The end of Lochner wasn't decided properly, and that we should have the freedom of contract, or as it was back then, liberty of contract, to where if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages at deplorable conditions, hey, that was your choice.
That's exactly right, and you're absolutely right. I mean, looking at the real threats to the ability of unions to function, real threats to the ability of administrative agencies to protect consumers, to protect workers, you name it, to protect the environment. It's these are scary times, but again, we got to keep fighting, and there are ways to do things. Even if you don't have the court, you got to work around the court, and there's, we'll see what happens. Assuming that the Democrats really gain the power in terms of, Schumer said nothing's off the table.
Yeah, I don't know. See, here's the thing. I've heard all that stuff before, and maybe it's just me, and I'm so so jaded by the past all these years.
The word you're going to use. Yeah, I know. I totally understand. But we gotta, we have to see. We have to see. I mean, I don't think it may not happen overnight, but one thing I do believe is Schumer said he if he gets the majority to be majority leader, he didn't fight that hard to get there to do nothing. So, I think it's just going to be how much assuming again the elections work in the Democrats' favor, that we'll see how much we can get done, and then what more we need to do. But I totally understand being jaded, but we got to fight. We got to keep fighting.
No, because I go back to I was just a small kid at the time, but the Carter administration had a chance to pass labor law reform and undo a lot of the horrible things that Taft-Hartley did. They didn't do it. And they had the power to. It was Democrats that stopped it. Bill Clinton didn't put a lot of shoulder into pushing strike replacement after Bob Dole's filibuster, and Barack Obama did nothing on the Employee Free Choice Act. So for me as a labor guy looking at the future, I'm a little concerned.
I totally get that, and that's probably it probably makes sense to be there. I'm a glass is half full person. I'm an optimist, and I just kind of feel like there's something in the wind here.
No, I'm with you. And look, I voted for Joe Biden.
Fed up. They're sick and tired. It's time.
Already took my blue and black pen and colored in the little dots and handed my ballot in at the county elections office. I tell people I voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I voted for Eugene DePasquale for Congress, and down the list. We got to throw the bums out and take back our government.
Make it happen. And I just think there's a different awakening here about how serious things are and how one-sided they are, and how if you get power back, you damn well better use it.
but here's the other side of this, Marge, and this is where I keep coming back to the reality of the right has out-organized us for decades. They've done over these years an incredible job of building talk radio into the massive powerhouse where Donald Trump got a 2-hour commercial last week that Joe Biden could never afford. And they built that infrastructure so that their candidates can get out to 50-some million people. The left never built the infrastructure, and my hope is, and the reason I bring this up is, when Barack Obama won in 2008, 2009, everyone went, well, we won, let's go home. The lesson I hope is learned, and I hope here in 21, nobody goes home. We stay in the streets. We stay pushing.
Right. That's absolutely right. I know you've talked to folks from our right-wing watch shop, in the past, and that's, the right is never going to go away. They're not going to go away. They're going to pound as hard as possible, and so you absolutely have to keep fighting. You have to keep, and we have to be comfortable using our power. This is not a time to shy away from. If you've got the power, you use it. That's one thing we certainly learned from the way in which the Republicans have used the power they have.
Yeah, I mean, if you get the keys to the steamroller, don't run over your foot.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right.
So last question I've got for you, because obviously we're in this moment, voting absolutely. Request your ballot if you're going to do the mail-in thing. Fill it out. Get it back to the elections office. Have a plan. First, make sure here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, make sure you're registered to vote. October 18th, the last day to get your registration, and do that by all means. But make a plan and then actually go and vote, because every vote does count.
That's exactly right.
But outside of this, I mean, what are you suggesting folks do? Voting is the simple part. We can cast our ballot. What's the pitch for folks to stay involved and to feel like they are involved and feel that power? Look, I've said before, I'm a member of a labor union. Right. I get that we're a fairly, even as diminished as we are, a fairly powerful entity. But most people sadly don't get that. How do we build that?
So I think there's three things. One, leading up to the election, it's not just you voting. It's making sure everybody around you votes. You've got a network. Everybody's got a network, and so you've got to make sure that it's not just you, but it's everybody you know. So that's one thing. The second thing is we got to realize that the vote is not likely to be counted on November 3rd. November 3rd is election day. It's not likely to be counted unless. So we have to be prepared for this period where we have to stay calm and make sure every vote's counted and do whatever we can to make sure every vote's counted. I suspect that's particularly true in Pennsylvania. And then we got to plan for the future. Assuming we have the power, we have got to hit the ground running, and we got to take advantage of every opportunity. We've got to move quickly. We've got to make sure that there's actual a relief for the real suffering that's going on right now in the middle of COVID and the economic downturn. We also got to reform our democracy. We've got to make sure that we're creating a democracy that functions, and then we just can't stop. You just got to bulldoze ahead. So make sure everybody around you knows how to vote. Make sure you stay calm, and make sure we're counting every vote, and that don't worry if you don't have it on election day. It's going to happen. Count every vote. Yeah, and then just hit the ground running.
Good news here in Pennsylvania. The Republicans tried to form a commission on the election through the House, one of the House committees. Mm-hmm. And because of the overwhelming pushback, they stopped.
Awesome.
So it's when people call their representatives and do right and do
absolutely makes a difference. It makes a difference. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the Trump administration, they tried to do this election fraud commission. It fell apart because the people just were opposed, and they just would not accept it. And that whole election commission thing fell apart because they just didn't have the support. People's voice is strong.
And as long as we stay together and we're pushing, we all row in the same direction.
Yep.
I think we'll be okay. But Marge, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Good talking with you.
Yeah, great talking to you. Take care.
Thanks so much, Marge Baker, Executive Vice President of People for the American Way. Their website, pfaw.org, People for the American Way, pfaw.org. Lots of good stuff there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1899. That was the day union miners in Mount Olive, Illinois, began commemorating Miners' Day. Every year, thousands came into town for a parade, music, and speeches. Mount Olive was the site of the only union-owned cemetery in the United States, established by UMWA Local 728 in the aftermath of the Verdun Massacre. A year before to the day, striking miners had been killed in a shootout with company goons attempting to herd scabs into the mines in Verdun, Illinois. But, as Mother Jones biographer Elliot Gorn notes, the train never unloaded its cargo, and the company was forced to settle. The Union hoped to erect a gravesite monument commemorating those miners who had been killed at Verdun, but they were refused by those who considered the fallen miners to be murderers and not martyrs. That's when the United Mine Workers established the Union Miners Cemetery, and on this day, 10,000 turned out for the Union's memorial ceremony. The United Mine Workers unveiled a monument dedicated to the fallen Verdun miners E.W. Smith, Joe Gitterly, Ernest Kramer, and E.F. Long. The day was filled with parades, music, laying of wreaths, and speeches. Haymarket widow and radical activist Lucy Parsons was among the speakers. In his book, Death and Dying in the Working Class, Michael Rossnow notes that her presence drew a direct connection between the fallen miners and the Haymarket martyrs, cut down while advancing the cause of labor. Thousands traveled to Mount Olive every year for celebrations, including Eugene V. Debs, miners leader John Mitchell, and Mother Jones. In 1923, Mother Jones asked to be buried with her boys, noting they are responsible for Illinois being the best organized labor state in America. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, the our patient zero, that would be patient zero, the super spreader in Orlando, having an event. And again, this is one of those moments where you go, do these people have no common sense or any type of decency within them? I was just watching some of the clips from the Orlando airport, and you look at all of the, there are thousands of people there, and no masks, no social distancing, shoulder to shoulder, huffing and puffing all over each other, and you wonder why. We've seen an uptick over these last few weeks, and look, from you go back to March, and I looked at some show notes from back in March of what was I saying back then? I was saying, look, our concern in all of this is always, one, overtaxing our healthcare system. I understand that it's 1 or 2% of people are going to die who get it. You're probably going to survive it. But what's it going to do to our healthcare system, and how many people are going to die because our healthcare system is overrun? That was first and foremost. And some of the graphs you've seen, we're heading toward that again from the way it looks. In fact, 5 states have seen a rise of over 50% of the week before, and that'd be Montana, New Mexico, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Vermont. I'm going, Vermont? But they also saw a 50% increase. And you go, well, you're talking not a lot of cases, not, not thousands and thousands, but as one of the folks who has sent me models has pointed out, it goes along this way where you're building a couple hundred, and it keeps banging along until eventually it explodes. And we're kind of we're biding our time to where the fear then it explodes. And back in March I was saying, look, November is going to be a problem. If we don't deal with this now, if we don't, clamp down, November is going to, the late fall into winter going to be bad. And all indications, from what experts and people are sending me, we're on that path. In fact, 31 states in the U.S. Are seeing their number of cases go up. There are only 3, surprisingly, that have had fewer average new daily cases, and that would be Maine, surprisingly Texas, and Washington. The rest of them, we're seeing increases. Now, I got to assume that, when Donald Trump comes to town, you're going to see an increase because you've got these massive events. I had another listener send me this interactive model to where they predict if you have an event of 100 people, you'll see this kind of a bump. If you have an event of 1,000 people, you'll see this kind of a bump. And once you start getting into the 1,000+ range, the numbers just go crazy out of control. And this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing from the guy who is now immune. He's now super, rip off the shirt. He's now Superman. And we find that he really wanted to rip off the shirt after his, lumbering up the stairs. He wanted to stand there after he ripped off his mask and then rip open his shirt with Superman on it. Kind of a WWE wrestling thing, which would have been perfect for his presidency. I wish he would have done that. I do. I really wish he would have gone to that kind of a caricature stunt kind of mode, because it would have been the most authentic thing he's done. It would have been the most Trumpian thing ever. But, the thing that gets me is that's how his mind works. This is all about the show. This is all about the entertainment value. And that's not how you govern. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is how we govern in the 21st century. Maybe it is all about the entertainment value and the cult of personality. Maybe I've got it wrong. But what's really concerning is it's going to mean people are going to die. And I know today's conversations that Democrats were trying to have, those are falling on deaf ears. At this moment, I don't know how many people are paying attention to the Barrett hearings. I'll tell you, I watched almost every minute of the Kavanaugh and the Gorsuch. This is, as I said from the start, I'm not enjoying the rape. I'm just not. This is flat wrong. And I'm not going to just take it. This is them, being honest. They have the power to dominate, to use a Trump word. They have the power to inflict their will on the rest of us, even though the majority of us say it should wait. As they said back in 2016, the precedent that they themselves set, they are now breaking. And I hope folks will put the caveat aside, because that's an excuse. That's a justification. And it wasn't one they were making back in 2016. I'm hoping people remember when they go to the ballot box. And I hope Marge is wrong. I hope, we had Joe Walsh on a couple of times, and he said, Rick, we're going to know on election night because it's going to be a landslide. I hope Joe's right. I hope he's right. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on today's process. Also, some other things to bang around. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Has been strengthening at a pretty robust rate.
Buckle up, Gulf Coast. Hurricane Delta is already a record breaker.
It's a disastrous new normal. Catastrophic fires, once contained to one season, now a harrowing year-round battle.
Grim milestone in California's historic disastrous fire season. Poland says it will phase out coal, plus Airbus debuts zero-emission passenger airplanes.
Really?
Yeah.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Since 1930, 5 of the biggest fires out of the top 10 have been this year.
California is America fast forward, the postcard from the future.
Oh man, are you serious? California is basically a postcard from the future? That means the future's also on fire?
Yep. Sorry, Trevor.
And it also means that the post office is still functioning in the future, so I guess, woo, we did it.
Okay, Desi Doyen, we've run through all the names in the alphabet for the storms, so now we're on to the Greek letters. I'm hoping there is not very many more because I know Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and I think I know Epsilon, but after that, I'm completely out.
Me too. But yes, Hurricane Delta has formed in the Caribbean and is on track to impact the central Gulf Coast of the United States. Delta is the earliest 25th named storm ever recorded in this historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. We're now into the Greek alphabet for storm names for only the second time on record. Delta formed more than a month earlier than the previous record 25th storm. That was back in 2005. The National Hurricane Center forecasts that Delta will rapidly intensify due to very warm ocean waters and has issued storm surge warnings from Texas to Florida. Delta could slam into beleaguered, storm-weary Louisiana, and if Delta makes landfall, it would be the first ever Greek-named storm to hit the United States. And it would be the 10th tropical storm to make landfall on the mainland U.S. this season, breaking the 1916 record of just 9 landfalling storms.
And we still got about a month to go in the storm season?
Actually, about 2 months.
Oh, boy.
A grim milestone in California.
So far this year, California has seen more than 8,000 wildfires, destroying more than 7,000 buildings.
The state's historic 2020 wildfire season, which shows no signs of slowing down, has now burned more than 4 million acres. That's more than 6,000 square miles, and it is more than double the state's previous record year. The 5 largest wildfires in California history have all hit this year and have killed more than 31 people in California and caused hundreds of billions of dollars in damages and economic losses.
And they tell us we can't afford to do anything about climate change.
In other news, a federal judge in Montana has ordered the removal of Trump's controversial acting director of the Bureau of Land Management, William Pendley. The judge ruled Pendley has been serving unlawfully for more than a year because he did not get Senate confirmation. Pendley advocates privatizing all of the public's lands, so of course Trump tried to put him in charge of the public's lands.
Is that the law and order president?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The court ruling could unravel some of Pendley's decisions. Oh, but don't worry, he's still there working in his old job.
Of course he is. Law and order.
And also at the Interior Department, after stalling for months, a top Trump interior official finally released a scientific study confirming the impact of oil development on federally protected polar bear populations in Alaska. The study shows that endangered polar bears are already being harmed by the loss of sea ice due to man-made climate change, but that climate change will open up more areas for oil extraction, which the study notes will also further harm polar bears. The study may slow down new oil exploration in parts of Alaska. In the coal industry, Robert E. Murray, the 80-year-old former CEO and president of bankrupt Murray Energy Coal Mining Company, who for years attacked federal mine safety regulations aimed at reducing terminal black lung disease among coal miners, and who disputed the health care claims of coal miners seeking treatment for black lung disease, has himself filed for black lung benefits.
Well, it's karma, but it's hard to be happy about that one.
But some good news.
Good.
Poland has signed an agreement with its coal mining unions to phase out coal entirely by 2050. Now, climate scientists say 2050 is too late, but policy experts say that the unions agreeing to an end date for the liquidation of Poland's coal mining industry is a huge development. The first time that Poland has put a timeline on ending coal, which accounts for about 75% of the country's electricity generation.
Really? I'll tell you, I always forget about Poland.
Finally, European airplane manufacturer Airbus has unveiled 3 new concepts for zero-emissions passenger planes that it hopes to launch for commercial use by 2035. The V-shaped Zero E's jet engine would use hydrogen as the primary fuel instead of kerosene, with onboard batteries to run it as a hybrid electric propulsion system.
Will it stay in the sky?
Yes!
It's witchcraft, I tell you. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Dr. Anthony Fauci feels like he's being harassed as the Trump campaign used his words in one of their ads. And not surprisingly, they didn't use all of his words. And they used the words that he had said a long time ago before everything went crazy. But again, truth doesn't seem to matter, especially when it comes to campaign ads. And here to share some thoughts on, well, where we are, where we're going, what we're doing, Master, our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time.
Thanks, Rick. We're going everywhere. That's where we're going. Everywhere.
Everywhere, in all directions. I got to tell you, I want Joe Biden to win so I can stop that feeling that I'm just being ripped in every direction all at once.
Or when you're looking at the news in the morning, you're wondering, how did the following 5 things happen last night? So yeah, that's how I feel.
Exactly. And, this thing with Fauci is, I saw the ad and I'm going, yeah, I don't think that's what he meant.
Well, right. I found something interesting. As of the last, 10 minutes, I was trying to see if if Fauci, and I understand this, by the way, so it's not a pick on Fauci, but I was just wondering if he demanded, I want off of that. I don't think he can probably do that, but he obviously had to say something, about his displeasure of being taken out of context.
Right.
He was talking about, health officials. Now, he made some nice comments about the president during a Senate hearing, which Trump campaign, was quick to say, but the Trump campaign hasn't come out and said, well, we're going to pull the ad because that's not what Fauci really said. They're more or less saying, yeah, that's what Fauci said.
No, they said, Fauci said what he said because that's what we wanted him to say.
Right. Right, exactly.
And the weird thing is this isn't the first bit of trouble the administration's gotten into, or the first, line that I think they've stepped over. I think the big rally at the White House on Saturday was a violation. I don't know how you can use the White House as a prop for your campaign event. Has that ever been done before?
You have to be careful. You can take, for example, you can take a picture in front of somewhere, for example, like the U.S. Capitol, and I'm going to compare the Capitol and the White House because both are, federal buildings by all rights. But you can't actually film campaign commercials in there, and you can't utilize the actual facility itself for a political event. You just can't. And those types of rules apply to the White House also. It's a federal facility. Now, if you want to stand in front of there and take a picture or something, but to actually do certain political things there, you're not supposed to do it.
Well, they had the big law enforcement rally on Saturday on the South Lawn. I'm going, that wasn't did he sign anything? Did I miss a signing of some sort?
Right. Now, I don't know if they walked a fine line, but if they use it again, if they have some type of meeting or something, but if they have a rally and it turns into a political rally, you're not supposed to do it.
Yeah. And now we find out that they've got a new online advertisement out that I guess dropped today, and it's got Defense Secretary Esper, the Mark Milley, the Joint Chief of Staff, as well as Vice President in this ad, targeting possible mail-in voters. And, it was always my view that you couldn't use the Defense Secretary or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They couldn't be part of that because it pulls them into the politics. It pulls our military into the politics. Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. I mean, if you think about it, now, if a military person is asked a question and they want to answer, and they're asked, you like the Commander-in-Chief, you can say yes. But as far as doing something political, I mean, they couldn't actually even be asked who they're going to vote for because that's it's a precedent that shouldn't happen
until now.
And they shouldn't be involved or their likeness is used, for something of a political nature. It just shouldn't. Well, now, if somebody was a previous soldier and they wanted to donate their time into a campaign and an ad, they could do that.
Private citizen,
but had been a soldier at one point in time,
Sure, and I don't have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. But the Joint Chief, I mean, yeah, right. The Defense Secretary who served at the pleasure of the White House. I mean, I don't know that there's much. Hey, would you do me a favor? As opposed to you're going to do this and you're going to like it.
Right, and they could have achieved what they wanted to achieve. Look, using somebody that has been over in the war in Iraq or Afghanistan, and they were a soldier at one time, and use he or she for an ad, that's a lot more effective, honestly, than using the Joint Chief of Staff anyway.
Yeah, because how many people actually know who he is?
That's right. But, a generic person that was, served the country and they want to make a statement pro-Trump, they can do it. But the Joint Chief of Staff, it's just I've never seen that in a commercial before.
It's crazy. But speaking of, of people endorsing Trump, I mean, the Taliban has given him their endorsement.
I know you've worked campaigns. I've had 12 runs of my own campaigns, and I've worked a lot of other campaigns. And I can recall back days when, I would tell the staff, make sure that person writing that letter supporting me, that letter is never, ever anywhere but burnt. Because you get certain people that
Sure.
want to support you, and you don't want them, you know?
Yeah, David Duke comes to mind.
Yeah, there you go. And this is one of them. The Taliban came out, and I mean, they said they didn't just endorse; they said things. Like I said, the Trump campaign is going to say, "Okay, I'm good. I'll pass," because the Taliban came out, and it was Zabihullah Mujahid, and he told CBS News, this is the Taliban spokesperson, that the militant Afghan group admires the president, they admires the America First focus, which is, I can't imagine the Taliban admires anything about us, and that Trump might be ridiculous for the rest of the world, but he's sane and wise man for the Taliban. And then I thought, are they trying to, on purpose, hurt him, or do they actually like him?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm wondering.
I don't know, but they did have the meeting, right? I mean, there was a meeting, and I guess this is trying to give Trump credit for getting the troops out. Because look, if I'm them, I want the U.S. out too. So I'm going to praise the guy who pulls them out.
Right.
So we can go back to doing what we were doing before.
Right, and of course the campaign rejected the support, and they came out like that. Then they attacked Biden in their rejection of the Taliban, by the way, because they said, unlike Joe Biden, who opposed taking out Osama bin Laden.
So
in their request to not have the endorsement, they attacked Joe Biden.
Well, because my mind then goes to, I wonder if there's the website Taliban for Trump out there, and if you can actually get a sign.
Somebody's probably going to create one. I would say.
I now gotta see if there's Taliban for Trump somewhere. But yeah, I saw that, and it just made me laugh, as a lot of things do. For instance, the stimulus, which should have been done months ago, the Republicans are holding it up, which is really just bizarre to me, because this is a huge windfall for them. I think we've talked about this before. I don't get why why Mitch McConnell and the leadership won't take what the gift horse is giving them.
Well, to set matters worse here, Larry Kudlow, who's the White House economic advisor, yesterday on the State of the Union, it was CNN, said that Trump was proposing a package that's even larger than the $2.2 trillion that Nancy Pelosi offered. And my analogy at this, when I look at it, is the White House took it off the table.
Right.
Now they're trying to reset the dinner table, but Nancy Pelosi's the cook. And so they're not going to reset it without Nancy Pelosi. And why should Nancy Pelosi do anything at this point in time? Donald, the reason you're seeing this is very clear-cut. Donald Trump all of a sudden said, we're taking it off the table. We're not going to have a stimulus bill till after the election. No, I'm done. Now, he did that because his supply-side economic guys around him are, having dinner with him and saying, hey, you can do the right thing. So he did it. Then all of a sudden the political people came in, and they said, what on earth are you doing? I mean, I'm making, obviously in layman's terms what I think happened, but I do think this happened. Political people came in and said, you can't do this. So he puts it back on the table within, 6 days of taking it off the table.
Yep.
And so why should Nancy Pelosi do anything at this point in time? I don't get it, because they blew it. The Senate should have done something back in May anyway, when the House did. And then on top of it, the Senate, when it did try to do something, couldn't get Republican support for it. They should have introduced something. I don't care what it was. They should have introduced something. They didn't. And people today say, well, they're going to move on it. No, they aren't. The Senate will do nothing on this.
No, there's nothing here. They're too busy ramming through Amy Coney Barrett. But, because I talked about this on Friday, the president says he's going to have a bigger plan. And Mnuchin says, up to $1.8 trillion. Last time I checked, the Democrats passed a plan, $3.4 trillion, and came down, I guess, to like 2.2.
Yes, they did.
And I'm going, how can you, I now know why Donald Trump, who claims he's a billionaire and is in such deep financial problems, because he's horrible at math. Because last time I checked, 1.8 was not more than 2.2 trillion.
Right.
So just in the messaging, I'm going, there's a real problem here on all sides. And I'm hoping come November 3rd, we throw these people out and somehow figure out how to right this ship.
Well, what they're doing is they're taking a series of ideas that they have of how to salvage this entire campaign, and they're throwing it up against the wall hoping something sticks. And they're not doing it in the smart way. They're not doing it in a good public policy way, and they're not doing it in a good political way.
Nope.
You don't cancel the stimulus talks and then turn around and put something in there that's larger than what you were complaining about, which is what they were complaining about Nancy Pelosi's, the extent of the money in the package. So why would they do this? Well, because they knew they made an error, because they all of a sudden told people across this country, you're not going to have a stimulus check. We don't even want to talk about it. And they realized that they did an error.
Yeah, no, and I've been saying this since May. It makes no sense to me why the Democrats are giving them the win. You would have never seen the Republicans do this for Obama at any point. In fact, they didn't during the stimulus talks. None of them voted for it, and you just would never see that. It's just it is so bizarre to me. Anyway, the big news of the day. Obviously, the hearing. Did you happen to watch any of it?
Yes, I watched some of it, and I find it all interesting. I found it interesting that Kamala Harris was in there by TV. I think that's actually a good move.
Yep.
I'm not so sure she was absent because of fear of COVID. I think it's more of it's better she's not there
it's
right
the
now.
Messaging.
Yes, the messaging. And then the Democratic side, you can tell, are in a bit of a box. They're worried. This is a 4-day hearing. They're going to lose, but also the Republicans are just dying to look for an opening. Remember when Senator Feinstein, during Barrett's hearing for her judgeship, used the word dogma?
Yep.
And once she used dogma, that would be comparing, if you have somebody there and you use the word dogma, and they're, I don't care, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, I don't care what they are, that set off the ability of the Republicans to say, I can't believe you're doing that to the Catholic faith. And so that's what the Republicans are looking for. They want an opening to discuss religion.
And that was their thing today. They wanted that religion fight. That this is just all about a religion. Where I think the Democrats did a really good job of personally I wouldn't have shown up, but I thought they did a good job of saying this is what her on the court could look like. End of health care, end of Roe. I thought they did the best they could do given the circumstances.
Right, because today the people talking about religion today were Republicans. The Democrats didn't bite on it.
Nope.
The Democrats didn't talk about religion, but the Republicans went back, what I've been talking about, to the 2017 confirmation hearing and quoted Feinstein and just threw that right out on the table. And then Senator Hawley of Missouri, Republican, just outright accused Democrats of, quote, a pattern and practice of religious bigotry. So that became, the mantra. Now, the Democratic side took the opportunity to talk about health care, to talk about basically what Trump was doing to it, and without directly aligning it to, herself. They talked about the issue.
Yep.
They took that opportunity.
No, I thought it was interesting because she sat there with her mask on, and you didn't hear a peep out of her. They were just giving their speeches, and I'm like, okay, and that's when I tuned out. I watched Senator Harris's spiel, and I tuned out for a while because it isn't going to get any different. And now we see Lindsey Graham speeding up the timetable a little bit, so they're going to ram this through even quicker.
Right. It's going to be a four-day deal, then they'll take it onward. And then Mitch McConnell said today because of this going on with the hearing, they can't multitask to do a stimulus bill.
Yeah.
Chew bubble gum and walk. It's not going to happen.
Well, they got to get back to the Senate districts where I'm hoping because of this they take an absolute beating.
Well, the seats are shaping up where this is a drag-out battle for the Senate. I think it's going to be very, very close. Whoever controls the Senate one way or the other is going to be very close. Of course, we've been watching the presidential, especially your state of Pennsylvania. watching that pretty close, of course, in Florida and Wisconsin.
It's all going to come down to Philadelphia. If they come out in Philadelphia in the numbers that they came out with for Obama, I think they got a really good chance of winning. If not, it's over.
Right.
But we'll see. I'm quite hopeful. In 2016, I think we both agreed Trump was going to win. I called it in April. I'm not saying Biden's going to 100% win, but I think he's got a good shot.
Well, yeah, right now, I mean, I said today, I would put it in the Biden camp to lose at this point in time. That's where I'd put it. He's got a great shot. Now, people today on radio said to me, well, yes, but Hillary Clinton was up 11 points. That is a different world. Number one, Hillary Clinton didn't go to Wisconsin. Two, she took it for granted she was going to win Pennsylvania. Three, she had a problem in Michigan. She ended up, with the Comey deal 10 days before her election. So you can't compare that 11-point advantage Hillary had that shrunk. You can't compare that to Biden. There was a whole different world then 4 years ago, a whole different set of factors, and Comey came in the very last 3 days of her election, quote, clearing her finally.
Yeah, which was just stupid. But look, Trump's trying to recreate that with Billy Barr and Durham.
Right. That's not going to happen.
And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't ram that through, because like I said, I don't think there's any there, and I think they know it. There may be some little things, but there's no smoking gun.
No, there's no silver bullet. There's maybe a couple of little sexy, spicy little things, but no silver bullet, and that's why it was held. Because if you look at the previous statements, Barr said it was going to be brought forth before the election, and now it isn't.
And finally,
there's no silver bullet.
And finally, the October surprise. Evidently, the president wants to do a nuclear deal with Putin in the days before the election.
Right.
Right. Am I missing something there?
Well, I myself thought, would you not want to actually kind of, forget the nuclear issue for a minute. I know people say that's important, but forget it for a minute. Do you actually want to if you're Donald Trump, do you want to do a deal with Putin?
Yeah.
Think about it before the election. I don't think so.
I mean, that picture of the two of you together. I mean, I don't know.
And you're going to fly to Russia. He's going to fly here. Are you going to do it by Zoom? I mean, I read this today, and I'm like, why? This is another example. I said, you take things and you throw them up against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. Well, when I saw
one
that,
of the things. When
I saw this, I said, Donald's just going to rip open his shirt, show his Superman cape, and he's going to fly.
Yeah, this was strange.
Just crazy, crazy times. Only 22 more days.
That's it.
And then the real fun begins.
Mm-hmm.
Counting
For
the
sure.
votes.
Oh, yes, because, I can, like I said, whoever wins, I hope it's big, because it'll be court battles and frenzy and on and on and on.
Yep, you couldn't write
Which
this.
I hope doesn't happen.
You couldn't write this story. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. That was the day that the first Industrial Congress of the United States met in New York City. People interested in the problems facing working people, including long hours, low pay, and unsafe working conditions, gathered together. The labor movement was just beginning in this country. These were the years when the early trade unions were formed. Women played an important role in the early labor movement. Female textile mill workers in Lawrence, Massachusetts began to organize for the 10-hour day. In 1844, they established the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. Their goal was to improve working conditions in the mills. The Lowell Women's Group sent a representative to New York for the Labor Congress. Another important development of the fledgling labor movement was the establishment of labor presses. George Henry Evans, a labor newsman, also attended the Congress. He was the editor of a series of U.S. labor papers, starting with the Workman's Advocate in 1829. He had come to the United States from England, where he had been involved in the trade labor movement. He also attended the Labor Congress. The meeting recommended the formation of 3 organizations. First was an industrial brotherhood for workers, including farmers. The second was an industrial sisterhood for women workers. The third was a group for Friends of Labor. The Congress met again in New York in 1847, then again met in Chicago in 1850. These early efforts to establish larger labor groups did not gain much traction, but they began to lay the framework for workers to come together to discuss their challenges and imagine how they could work together to bring about change for better wages, shorter hours, and safer working conditions. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, sad day in the McCain family. Roberta McCain, the mother of former Senator John McCain, died this morning, 108 years old. Sad day. And look, I don't believe it was COVID related. It didn't say, but it's one of those things. I mean, she was kind of especially in Arizona, kind of an icon. Sad. And finally, this day, remember Foxconn? Remember the whole Foxconn dust up? You remember Donald Trump? All thrilled that they were moving to Wisconsin, and actually went out for a shovel ceremony. They actually got him a picture with the shovel. Remember, they were going to give them some just obscene amount of money. I mean, it was billions of dollars to come in and create 13,000 jobs, and then immediately they said, well, maybe not 13,000. How about 3? Well, for the second year in a row, they have not hit the number that they had promised. And, I'm surprised that this was in here, to be honest. They've missed the employment targets, so they're actually not going to get the full tax credits that they were promised. Which I got to tell you, I'm pretty surprised at. And something that I've been talking about for a long time, that as we give these big corporations just tons of money, there's got to be something on the back end. This stuff has got to pay off in the jobs that we're told they're going to create. Because too often what happens is they sell us these great ideas, and then you don't get jobs. Or the other thing that they do is they subcontract them. They're all independent contractor jobs. They're all third-party logistic company jobs. And for me, we're in this moment of, I'd like to see a lot of that stuff stop. I would like to see an end to the destruction of the standard of living that our grandparents and great-grandparents fought for. And sadly, to bring this back to Amy Coney Barrett, I see her as the deciding vote in moving us back to those bad old days. The more you take people's ability to collectively bargain away, the more you silence their voice in the workplace, and the more the pendulum swings to corporate special interests, the worse it gets for average everyday people. And as I had a conversation recently with someone who's just said, Rick, it's just going to have to get really bad. The only way some people learn is by having to live through the horrible. And I hope that's not who we are. Although sadly for some of us, I do believe that is it. because I don't want to go back to the days of no overtime laws and no minimum wage laws and no safety on the job, or severely diminished, or even worse yet, they're on the books and nobody enforces them, which is where we are today. We've got an administration who, there are laws on the books, they're just not enforcing them. And I think the COVID experience for working people, all while we're calling them heroes and saying how appreciative we are for them, how much we love them, and thank goodness you're heroes, frontline essential heroes. OSHA did nothing. And the Republicans want to provide employers with immunity. That's where we are, folks. That's where we are. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next